Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Govern AI Agent Identities, a 2026 Security Playbook. We're excited to have you here as we dive into one of the most important topics shaping the future of security. Before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping notes to go over. First, this session is being recorded, and we'll share the on-demand link with you afterwards so you can revisit with your team. Second, we encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webinar. You can drop them in the question panel and in the chat panel, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. And stay tuned to the end, where we will draw our winner for the giveaway of a Lunch and Learn with Ed. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to today's speaker, Ed Higgins, Director of Security and Compliance here at Quisitive. Ed, take it away.
Hey, it's great to have everyone. Welcome to the session, everyone. We'll have a little basic ramp up, and I'm going to take a little time so we can let others join and stuff like that. But my name is Ed Higgins. I head our security and compliance team here at Quisitive. I'm one of our directors and work with clients every day. In today's session, we're talking about something that's very passionate to me. As being a security guy my whole career and a CISO for 10 of those years, and starting out in the DoD where trusted compute and identities were a kind of a big deal back in the day, and still to this day, even more so. We're going to be talking about governing agent identities, which is a kind of a new thing, not dissimilar from things like service accounts, but something that can actually make decisions on its own. It's a very new topic and something that's very interesting to me on lots of fronts. So we're going to peel that back a little bit. It's not going to be deep dive into every nut and bolt, but it's going to be a pretty good cursory introduction to the topic at hand and how to put some guardrails around and where to get started. So, a little bit about Quisitive. We're a Microsoft managed security services partner. I'm part of that team. We sometimes use the word spyglass. You'll hear us say that. You'll see it on our website. But that's just a brand for our managed security and compliance services. And we're one of Microsoft's most decorated partners. So we have all the pedigree, all the certifications around partner advanced specializations in AI and security and app dev and all of those exciting things. So we've been there, done that, and we've been a 30+ year partner to Microsoft. But as practitioners, as security practitioners, as a pretty big chunk of our company is, we have to know how to make technology of Microsoft work well with other technologies, and where identity comes to bear, and especially around agent identities, there's lots of things that are interacting with that. So let's jump in. Let's have some fun. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat window as well. But Courtney, Tanny, our team is here, kind of leaning in and listening in, and we're going to field questions maybe along the way or at the kind of end of the session. We're going to keep it kind of tight and crisp to about a little less than 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so, somewhere around there. There's no time limit, but I want to be respectful to your time. So we'll kind of try to gauge our time and keep us on track as best I can. But like I said, this is one of those areas that I'm very passionate about. So if we go over, we go over. I'm just kidding. So the thing is, in 2023, and if you remember, like the .com era, that was where the internet was new to us. That was my first big bang to seeing things change, going from traditional on-prem to available everywhere and anytime. And then we saw the race to the cloud, abandoning data centers. People are still doing that, weighing the build versus buy. Should I move to the cloud? Should I stay with my on-prem data centers? That was kind of the next big bang. And this mode of AI came up not just in 2023, but a little bit before that, maybe a long time before that. But for commercial use, where users now can start interacting with this thing 2023 was a year of experimentation. We learned a lot about large language models and what they could do and how smart they've become, things like that. 2024 was a year of kind of furthering that journey, exploring what co-pilots can do. I remember in 2024 when I came back from a vacation and I said, this co-pilot thing is kind of new. We're pushing it here at Quisitive. We're always on the front running with Microsoft Tech. And so all of us had the capability to run Copilot. And I said, hey, catch me up on what I missed. And I found that, Copilot went through my email, went through my Teams chats, helped me prioritize things to a handful of things. And, you go away for a couple of weeks, you come back to 100 or more different tasks that you need to kind of get caught up on. And it made short work of that. So we all went through that, or lots of us in the industry went through that in 2024. 2025 started out with agents. You hear it all the time, agentic. It's like a marketing buzzword, agentic. And, AI systems that reason, they act, they collaborate even with one another, and they operate autonomously by themselves to do things to help you out. So we're seeing a lot of that. And that was 2025. So what's happening 2026 is going to be kind of interesting because the prediction, and we're actually seeing this a lot. You are probably as well. Certainly in the industry, you read the, Gartner predictions and yada, yada, yada. You start to see the growth potential. And by 2026, most enterprises are slated to have more autonomous AI agents than they have human users, which is not surprising. One stat that I saw, and it's pretty consistent, is by 2026, 2027, autonomous agents will be helping people out, doing things for them autonomously, or doing things that other people would be doing for them, or what have you. And it's not, the stat is, it's not, say, uncommon, but it's part of the thought process that each human person has 8 to 10 agentic or agent identities operating autonomously to help us do our jobs. That means we've got a 10x growth of our user footprint. If you think about human users and non-human users, that's going to be a big deal for things like your Active Directory, your Entra, how you govern that. And this is what this session here is about. So, if you think about each human having 10 agents helping them do things behind the scenes, and even in the foreground doing things in front of the scenes, this shift isn't just about capability, it's about accountability. And the question isn't if, it's how do we secure, it's going to be about resilience. I've been saying resilience all year long on webinars and a few keynotes that I was privileged to be able to do. It's not about compliance. Are we compliant? Are we ready? Do we know how to react? Do we know how to deal? And it's not just reactive, it's preemptive. So it's not if something happens, it's when it happens, are we able to respond to that? And so this mantra carries over into the age of agents and agent identities. What is an agentic? What is agentic AI? So if you think about traditional automation, my day, my savvy was in Unix systems, and we would run things as a cron job, and we would run those things as root. You can do the same thing with scheduler and have those things run as admin. Different operating systems call them different things, but it's basically something is running on a time calendar and doing something. If you think about like executing instructions, running the script at a given time, we've always been doing that. And a lot of automation has happened that way. And the adage of service accounts came into being where, we can't put Ed's username and password into a script. So let's create a service account. And there's a whole dialogue on that. But, as we advance, and we go from what is traditional automations, and not just those cron jobs or scripts or task manager functions that can be set on schedules, but now getting into like workflow automations. We have a great automation team here at Quisitive that helps clients automate things like patching and user management, stuff like that. And those take on that traditional automation and they execute instructions to, either event driven, this happened, patch came in, let's push the patch, or on a chronologic table like a time calendar. Now, when you think about the human being separated from that job, that batch job, and the app being separated, now if you bring them all together and you say, this use case is not just a human, but maybe an agent identity that can plan, perceive, read sentiment, think about other priorities, and reason. That's where this conversation is going. That's what we're talking about today. Not about batch jobs or any of that stuff, but about an agent that has the ability to gain access, think almost for itself, or for lack of a better word, think for itself, and reason against your environment or what it's asked to do, and even create tasks for itself to go do those and act completely autonomously. We'll talk about a few use cases, and and I want to give you a story. So it kind of sets the stage. Last year, a finance team built a small Copilot Power Automate to reconcile vendor payments. 6 months later, that same logic connected to an Azure agent via MCP, we'll get into those acronyms in a little bit, was initiating wire transfers on its own. So the moral of the story is it was thinking, and it wasn't malicious. It was actually being very helpful, but it was ungoverned. It didn't have the guardrails. It didn't have the proper instruction set. So it's kind of cowboy, freelancing. And so, did we give that autonomous agent the credit for thinking outside of our box, that it's thinking about things that we may never even think about, and we have to be prepared for that. So this is where we're at today. Our digital teams are starting to, the digital teammate, so to speak, the agents are starting to act on their own. I hope that resonates with you all, because it's kind of exciting. It's a little scary in times, but it's kind of an exciting time for us all. A little story here. Imagine a sales agent that keeps creating sub-agents for each region. Is it helpful? Is it governed? Not yet. It might be helpful, but and this is one that I used in a keynote that I did for a healthcare conference up in Boston several months back in June, I think it was. And it's real. It was prevented because of human intervention. So nothing bad happened, but it actually could have. So a fully autonomous, non-human agent working on behalf or for an ER doctor. Think about that. Human identity, having an agent helping out. The agent is designed to help fill prescriptions for patients being treated by the doctor. The agent prescribes a medicine that the LLM or the instruction set that was coded for the agent didn't check for the patient's specific allergic reaction. The patient's situation became catastrophic and nearly fatal. The doctor's the one that's responsible. There weren't any checks and balances to confirm the actions of the agent were fully vetted. Of course, this is I'm going to caveat this is a made-up scenario, but it raises the hair up on the back of your neck that the only thing that acted here was ethics, a moral compass of the hospital, and the human checks and balances to prevent such an autonomous agent from being deployed to help automate a function that could require lots of research to investigate the patient's allergies and so on. So we got to be very careful, not frightened to death of going into something, but this thing needs the governance that goes solely beyond soul ethics and moral compass. And I hope you probably are already well versed on that. But that's where the identity explosion kicks in. Every agent has this credential and its entitlements, and they don't log off, they don't forget, they're just constantly finding ways to help you out. And the thing is that I said it earlier, and we'll kind of visit this over and over. What a takeaway theme that I probably want you to grab onto is that agent and its ability to reason beyond what we might fathom as reasonable. Like we have our, a child is so artistic when they're very young, and then they grow up and go to school, and they lose some of that creativity because it's kind of learned out of them. And we always want to foster that. But if you think about it that way, this agentic and AI agent capability has the ability to think about things we've never even thought about and apply them to its work tasks. So we've got to give it good, solid instruction. We've got to give it good guardrails, good grounding, to prevent things like bias or misdiagnosis or verdicts that don't have a human reasoning into it, and so forth. So I don't want to get too tied up in that, but it's an area that this identity explosion is converging a lot of things around what was human intervention, and now this agent is going to have the ability to behave and make decisions, and we always want to have a check and a balance there. So some of these traits, there's traits that security people get concerned around, and I'd imagine there's a bunch of you here that are security people or people curious on AI and the use cases. But security plays that role in it. We take that very seriously here at Quisitive. But 5 kind of traits that make agents risky. They're self-initiating. They can act without direct human prompts. You point and click, and it goes. They're persistent. They never log off. They're always thinking. They're always operating. And this was that part. They're opaque. You don't always see what they're reasoning. It's an interesting kind of connotation. We don't have the ability to think like the machine. And when you give the machine the ability to reason and rationale on its own, rationalize things on its own, it might think of things we hadn't thought about, which is exciting and, like I said, a little scary at the same time. They're prolific. Users can spawn it off in seconds. So you can an agent can be stood up very quickly, and they're interconnected. They can talk to each other, and those are all controllable things. But they're part of why we're here. Governance must adapt to these 5 traits. So powerful capabilities introduce a whole not terribly new, but some new governance challenges, or at the very least, bring up governance matters maybe more upfront and, in our face than we have in the past. Sometimes governance topics have taken a back seat to, but we've got to get to the cloud. So governance takes a back seat to that. And this doesn't happen. Governance has got to be first and foremost with AI, and especially in the use cases of agent identities. So when a risk shifts from apps to agents, you think about your agent, where along the way, traditional AIM controls were designed for predictable human workloads. Agentic AI changes all that. Now we have an agent-to-agent communication, automating the decisions, automating the questions that it asks, and evolving the context that it responds with and actually works with. Risk is shifting from misused credentials to misaligned autonomy. And this means we got to treat them a little differently, like first-class workloads governed with the same rigor as any critical system. So access controls now need to consider the agent-to-agent interaction, or A to A. A2A. You'll see that acronym come up. And you'll see it in other places because these are not our acronyms. These are industry practices. Data security must also now include prompt injection and context injection or context leakage risks as well, because now we're not just dealing around identifying and safeguarding classified or sensitive data. We've also got to deal with that very thing for prompts and the context that forms the basis of our LLMs or RAG models or what have you. And then compliance and lifecycle management now have to deal with the non-human identity. Some of you may have had OT environments, operational tech environments where you've got SCADA devices operating to control valves and stuff like that. You may have a little bit of a jump on things about how do we put the compliance and lifecycle management around non-human identities. But it kind of goes in the same direction as like an OT discussion. And so we kind of want to think not like that and think about it as an OT environment, but think a little bit differently because it's not just a human identity, it's a non-human identity. This isn't a commercial. We're a well-known Microsoft partner. Microsoft is actually leading the way in lots of innovation, difficult conversations, and solutioning around agents, identity, the co-pilots, all of that. So what I'm saying here isn't about, promoting Microsoft. They are actually taking a really responsible front-end position, and they introduced Entra Agent ID, which is a hero utility for us to use now to kind of grab onto. But it doesn't just stop there. It's not a one, single bullet, click to turn it on and you're good to go. You got to have your governance model there. But Microsoft's part of their answer is Agent ID or Entra Agent ID. It's a feature, and it's an identity type built specifically for AI agents. And this brings kind of the what they're doing with driving innovation in industry standards like OAuth 2.0. Microsoft is really pounding it. Sorry for the slang or whatever, but they're really pushing the envelope with the development and advancement of OAuth. OAuth is modern authentication, but OAuth 2.0 also takes into considerations advancements on human identity controls and privileged user, but it also deals with a non-human identity. So, this is where they're really leaning in to have, security first architectures that really kind of make that journey into agents or agent identity use cases more smooth. So this governance is much more broad than OAuth 2.0 or Entra Agent ID. You've got to think about, managing your identity that has no default permissions, full accountability, and just-in-time access. You want to think about that when you have your non-human identities, and that's what Entra Agent ID helps us with. It helps us don't give default priv. Everything has got a log and an accountability structure to it, and an escalation for a human intervention in the workflow. And it's just in time. When it needs the access, it requests it, it's granted. Almost think about it like if you're familiar with your privileged users, like admin users in your Microsoft 365 global admin. People don't usually, we see it that often people have it, but you don't need it. You could be a regular user and be a privileged identity management or PIM user and PIM up. That means you request the privilege of up to global admin, and it's granted. Manager might click a button to say approve you using it, but there's a whole workflow around that, and it may be time boxed. It may be let Ed come in as global admin, so I PIM up, get the privilege. It could be exchange admin to go fix a problem, and then when I'm done fixing the problem, it revokes my access down to regular Ed. That's actually a good best practice. That's a really solid one because one, it takes the the rug out from under a bad actor very quickly when you have a lateral movement situation. Your regular user account gets broken into. The bad guy wants to elevate privilege to become admin and take over your estate. You don't want that. It's not a good feeling. So when you have PIM, it kind of disrupts that. It takes away that lateral movement surface. There's lots of surfaces in security, but the act of PIM being implemented helps that. And similarly, Enter Agent ID is helping us with those controls, both internal and certainly external, to keep that. And Enter ID is also introducing some things that bring the same rigor that zero trust. We live and breathe and eat zero trust in our day-to-day practices, in our Spyglass team, in our delivery of projects. We think zero trust. So you also want to you probably already are all on top of that, but zero trust is a kind of an important structure because there's the expansion of not just Enter ID, but incorporating the zero trust principles in the execution of Enter ID and your data protection schemas and all of those things. But Enter ID brings that same zero trust rigor to agents that Enter ID brings to regular users. So we've got that working for us, and it's something that can be taken advantage of. Earlier, I mentioned that acronym MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's an open protocol, open standard that lets agents interact with data, talk to each other, tools, and so forth. It's almost like a USB port for your AI agents. It's general, you can plug your monitor into a USB-C port. You can plug a power charger in. It just knows what that is. Well, the concept of MCP is kind of the same. It has a lot of power, but it also has the ability to cause a lot of havoc. So like any connectors, if you don't govern what's plugged into it, you're inviting data exfiltration, prompt injection, and any kind of a road action that you could probably think of. So you want to, get acquainted with MCP and how the connectors are that your agentic projects will start to incorporate this, because it may enable a lot of power, but it may enable some areas where you need to kind of bolster your role-based access controls, as well as strong authentication, your PIM processes and stuff like that. This is where our first and foremost in our acquisitive governance frameworks that we help clients with, MCP is part of that dialogue. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an open standard type conversation. Every one of these capabilities has connectors. It might be, AWS might call it something different. Google might call it something different. Microsoft might call it something different, but they're going to operate somewhat similar to each other. And you want to have that connector approach as part of your governance review processes as well. It's kind of an important thing. So securing an agent's life cycle, discover, assign identity, govern the access, monitor it, and then retire it. Those are, perhaps intuitive. Let's call it. I think they're intuitive, but let's kind of explain them. Know what you've got. Discover your agents. You onboard it. You assign it least privilege. You monitor its actions, and you log it. You review those logs, and you refine accordingly. And then you retire it when it's no longer needed. I think that's going to be an area, when a human retires or leaves the company or gets terminated, whatever the reason, we have an offboarding where you remove the user. It might be automated, it might be tied in with your, HR system, what have you. But when an agent is no longer needed, what happens to that? Do we remember to revoke its access when it's no longer needed? Those are things that we kind of don't want to not turn over those stones. So the problem today is people have agents without any ownership. No one owns it. We created it because it's like kind of a cool thing to have, and no one owns it. So how do we know when to revoke that level of access? So we want to really think about that. And that's where governance blind spots happen, and we can't afford to let them happen. So kind of getting on the front end of that, using these 5 things as ways to help guide you on, have we thought about this? Do we know what we've got? Have we discovered? Do we know how to assign least priv? Maintain those zero trust principles. They still apply. Nothing changed. None of it changed about how we deal with our estate and our IT controls. We just have some new things to think about in the rationale of applying these core principles like zero trust or good governance process and so forth. In a couple of healthcare examples where we've helped some clients in healthcare, we helped a national healthcare organization. This is kind of like some examples of what does an agent do? How can we leverage that? What do we do? What's involved? So we helped a national healthcare organization deploy co-pilot agents with Entra ID, Agent ID, and Purview DLP controls, and DSPM, Data Security Posture Management, DSPM. Those handful of tools can help. And in the case of the healthcare institution, we help them mitigate the potential for any violation of patient privacy. So kind of using these tools to help look at a very specific function around ensuring patient privacy. In another case, we helped a client in financial services. We deployed an agent registry to track all those MCP connected agents, handling payments and risk reports and so on. In a government institution, we tied their Defender and XDR and Sentinel environment, their Microsoft SIEM, Security Information and Event Management, and their XDR process to be able to monitor and alert on agent behaviors and anomalies. And these weren't really experiments, they were actually real blueprinted executions. So we've got lots of great story. The message here is every one of these programs started with visibility and then matured into the control, and the governance was always front and center with that. Those 6 things I showed you, discover, or 5 things, discover, least priv, monitor the activities, and then retire when not used. You apply those to your life cycle. And there are layers. Over on the right are the kind of pictures. We can. In fact, I think there's a couple of takeaways. I want you to have a couple of takeaways that if you're a Microsoft user, and most of our clients are, Microsoft partner, we talk to Microsoft clients all the time. So we show a few things. I'm going to give you those here so you have them as what should I use to do X? What should I use to do Y? But the 7 layers of agentic security at the foundational level, it's not a zero trust picture, because zero trust would say data is just as important. Not trusting people around data is just as important around not trusting people around identity or access or device or app, what have you. But the pillars in this buildup are rather important. So you've got your identity management, the onboarding, offboarding, both for human and non-human, access control, least privilege model, your data security elements, classify, discover what's sensitive. And by sensitive, it could be not just social security numbers and credit card numbers. Those might be considered in your classification schema as being like restricted, like these are restricted or regulated data. So if you think about that, what about your intellectual property? Well, that might be sensitive or confidential, and different levels of classification. That's where that data security element, if you define those things and you put in the controls to say, don't let my agentic use cases interact with regulated data, or um, or my IP. Maybe you need it to interact with your IP because the job that the agent is doing for you relates to your IP, your intellectual property. So you have to make those conscientious decisions. But Purview helps you with that. And then posture management, threat protection. We get up and then, reporting on that and having the visibility. Are we compliant? It's not at the top because it's the tip of the spear or the icing on the cupcake. It's a pyramid, it's a buildup that if you do all of these other things, then you will arrive at compliance. None of these are more important than the other. It's why I don't love triangles like this, because it almost gives you a feeling that compliance is the most important thing, and it's actually not. They're all important. So, take that away. You think of your defenders, not just defender for endpoint, but defender for cloud, those things on your servers, defender for Kubernetes, and then bringing them all together into the monitoring and threat protection where Sentinel, the defenders can all interact. And we do tons of work. You already have this stack, lots of the pieces of it. You probably already own these things, and we can help activate it and point it towards your agents. And that's what we're doing. Lots of that right now. We're helping clients, one, deploy the stack for their own human estate, but also we can also pivot it and point it to also serve the non-human identities. Really important. A thing that's something I want you to have is that 2026 playbook I mentioned. There's a handful of things. We do a bunch of consulting around this. And so we're going to give you some things, trust is by design and governance at scale. But this is, by 2026, your organization is going to be doing some form of this. If you're playing in the area of agents and that level of agentic use case, you need to be kind of leaning in on some of these things. Maybe not all of them, but some of them, and preferably all of them. And succeed us to take it beyond where we go. But as a consultancy that's working with hundreds and thousands of clients, we might bump into things before a single customer bumps into things on their own estate. That's the value of us as a partner. We're dealing with things at lots of scale. And what we're doing, what Quisitive is doing, and what Microsoft is doing together is where the future of AI agent use cases is trustworthy right out of the gate, is by design. Can't overemphasize that enough. Our agentic security framework model is that discover, govern, secure, manage, evolve. It's kind of a traditional life cycle. If you were to take a pencil and you draw sorry for the terrible arrow, you draw your arrow and you think about that, you're always spinning. That is like a clock. It's always ticking. And when you get back to govern, or you get back to evolve, lessons learned, apply lessons learned, learn from your growth, then you're back in discovery mode and you keep iterating on that. Well, that's the life cycle that we play. And when we integrate things in the discovery of your agents, the use cases for them, how to put the guardrails, establish those governance models, and the registries. An important thing is build a registry of the agents, the use cases, the owners that should be responsible for maybe not answering a query that an agent has of a human. Hey, what should I do with this? It might ask you, what should I do with this? Well, you want to be able to answer it. And there should be an assignment of who should answer that. That's a kind of a process centric. You want to think about those things. So having those governance models, the frameworks to help you, and then do integrate things like Entra ID, agent identity, and MCP controls to, if it looks like a USB port for agent IDs, put some guardrails around that to fence it off. And then your your Entra agent ID as well. Light those capabilities up and properly, and then have that vigilance to operate it. And that, our managed service can help you with that. This is not supposed to be, self-serving that way, but we do work with clients, and, as a partner, and we're, Microsoft Intelligence Security association or a MISA partner. We work with Microsoft like all the time to help drive some of the innovation that goes into their top technology. So as a go-to partner with Microsoft, we're way up there on the go-to poll. We get to see things before others do. And often our clients benefit from that because seeing things new for the first time will fail first. So you don't have to. And we do that in the lab. So none of our client projects fail, but we bump into things so we can have those workarounds. And that's the value of a partner like Quisitive to help you through that process. When we think in terms of establishing lines of discovery, control, and operationalizing an environment, think of 30 days to discover agents, assign identities, another 30 days to enforce some access and DLP control, set up those baseline things around the control, having those enforceable controls, and then operationalize, iterating on that, is your next 30. So you could have a 90-day plan to stand things up and integrate the monitoring, integrate the lessons learned, those life cycle iterations. One beneficial thing is if we take this and we think about zero trust principles as they apply to like agentic or agent identities. The principle on the left, we were not going to run through these things in the essence of time. We're going to move quickly, but you'll get this slide deck will be available to you. And it lays out for you the zero trust principles in alignment with, what does this mean for an agent identity? So verify explicitly, authenticate, and authorize every agent action based on the identity, the context, and the risk. And then the Microsoft technology that helps it, enter ID, enter agent ID, conditional access, risk-based conditional access, continuous access evaluation, constantly looking at those things. And then what is our best practice? So we assign agent IDs to all autonomous workloads. We require sponsorship and ownership for each, et cetera. So you kind of see the layout. I wanted to kind of show you what we mean by that, but you can move through that on your own and follow that up. Some people ask me a lot, what I have the Microsoft tools. There's so many of them. I don't even know what we've got and where to begin. A lot of these things fit into the Microsoft E5 category of things. Some of them are in Azure. Most of them are, M365 E5 or security E5 features. So in the middle there is the Microsoft technology. The new one that came out earlier this year, was Entra Agent Identity. That's our hero helper right now for, giving us a hand with this, but not dissimilar from that importance is the Purview, DLP, DSPM, data security, posture management, Defender for cloud, your enter permissions, and so forth and so forth. And the purpose is over on the right, so you can kind of see the lay of the land there. And you establish your identity foundation, your governance and sponsorship, and your compliance reviews. How can we help build this? I know we're kind of coming up on time. I just wanted to pull up one slide, and it is getting a ton. If any of these, not slides, but any of my presentation resonated with things that you're stuck on or trying to embark on, this is a killer hero offer that we've built. And it's a secure AI quick start. It's a relatively short program. So we do this in less than 3 weeks, but we do a zero trust assessment of your estate. We do the, Purview data scans, the Copilot guided review. And then we help build up a defensible roadmap for your adoption of AI. So you're, making sure that your journey has those, a cover on every manhole, so to speak, so you don't fall into those pits. So you can click on this QR code. You just email us, get Ask Quisitive, whatever's the handiest thing. But this kind of, brings us to a close in this. If you think about every wave of innovation and visibility and governance, that separates that bold from the reckless. Remember the internet era. Remember retiring data centers, racing to the cloud. In the internet era, .com was about your access being available everywhere, anywhere, anytime. We all went through that in the early 90s. Some of us may not have been born then, but it happened, and it was a big deal. The cloud era was about securing those workloads. We raced to the cloud. Data centers cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, maybe more. And moving to the cloud it helped us not have to deal with tech refreshment and paying the power bill. The CFO always saw the power bill. IT sometimes never even saw the power bill. So yeah, we'll put another 20 servers in the rack and it burns another bunch of power. And the CFO is like, why did the power bill go up? Well, the race to the cloud helped solve some of that and help still solve some of that. But it happened, it was kind of like that big bang. And this AI era or agent era is actually no different. And so we're just about securing behaviors. That's all this whole engagement is about, or this whole dialogue is about. The journey should not be scary, but you don't want to go in with your eyes closed. You want to go in full open, think about governance, think about stakeholders, think about sponsorship, and think about that, not just putting the moral compass and the ethics to prevent that patient scenario from happening, but think about having those guardrails that condition should never happen in the first place. And it's possible, and we'd love to help you. And so with that, I'm going to switch over and see, do we have any questions? Ask away if you do. And we actually have a question if we do not. We're kind of tight on time, we're a little bit over. But I'll just pose this question that we have. It was asked of us kind of a few times. How do you manage privileged identity for non-human IDs? Specifically, what if the non-human agent needs more privilege than the human user to do a task? Now, me being a DoD guy, that breaks all sorts of rules in my head because I'm a trusted compute guy back in the day. And so trusted compute was no one ever should get access to privilege higher than their classification. Well, an agent might be able to do that. So that creates a whole new thing. It's a really great question that was asked to us by a client in another engagement. And it's about 4 steps ahead of where everyone else is right now. So A+ to our customer that asked that a while back. Presently, we ensure that the governance identifies all the areas where non-human agent would need privilege, then escalate a request almost like PIM for just-in-time access. So think of it as PIM. Technically, the non-human agent should never exceed the privilege of its human. But there will come a day very soon where that could happen, that could change. Microsoft Entra ID or Agent ID works really well to help that by fencing off that access, providing the escalation, the workflow, and then of course the monitoring and the privilege, and of what we've done today. I see someone is typing a question, so I want to see if there's something here for me to answer. And while that's going, I'm going to let Courtney go, and I see Tyler typing, so keep typing, Tyler. It's okay. And Courtney, why don't you take it from here and kind of close us out?
All right. Thank you all for joining us. We have one last thing to go through, and that is our winner for Lunch with Ed. Our winner today is going to be Tyler Week. So Tyler, look out for an email from me that will get this scheduled for you. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is an important topic, and we hope we found it valuable. Have a great day.